I have too much gear. So naturally, I need to milk it for content. I definitely need to sell some of that gear, and of course, when I do, I'll milk that for content as well. But today I want to talk about the gear that I will likely never sell. But one thing I do want to sell you is this shirt, available at the link in the description. All the designs were done by my very good friend Gwen of Coastline Creative, and a purchase of a shirt helps keep the channel going, so thank you so much if you choose to do that. But regardless, let's actually get into the list. Y'all probably saw this one coming, right? The original circuit is the thing that, for better or worse, ruined my life, sending me down this groovebox rabbit hole. And on one hand, it got me making music at a time when I was adjusting to really getting into my career in engineering and short on time, short on energy, and this has continued to be an outlet for that because of its portability, because of its ease of use and simplicity, at least for the way that my brain works. And with the circuit tracks, it is expandable. And those reasons all come together to mean that I'm not getting rid of this thing. Full disclosure, Novation sent this to me, but if it was to get destroyed in a fire tomorrow, I would just go buy another one. It means that much to me as far as a tool. It feels like an extension of my brain in a lot of ways. I understand that I talk the circuit tracks up a lot, and I do want to be very clear that even though I talk it up about how much I like it, it is not for everyone. Some people will find the lack of screen limiting or frustrating, whereas for me, I find it just makes it feel more tactile than some of the other devices that I have access to. And its sound engines are a bit limited and a bit ancient. But honestly, I think they sound fine for most applications, and I'm usually combining it with other devices. When I think about what device I would want to use for a live synth set, some sort of live performance, the tracks is the first thing I think of, always. Because not only does it expand by controlling other synths with its dedicated MIDI tracks and then piping that audio back in and doing stuff like reverbing and sidechaining it. Not only does it do all that, but it's got the project switching, meaning building up a continuous set with tempo changes is able to be very dynamic. Combining the circuit with a different circuit is actually weirdly frustrating, so if I was keeping my list of devices that I get to keep, assuming I sell everything, which I won't, but assuming I do, if I was to keep that list as small as possible, I would keep the tracks and not the rhythm. I like the rhythm, but stuff made on the rhythm by itself often feels just a little bit empty, and I find the tracks usually fits the kind of music that I'm making, like, especially synthwave, let's be real, a little bit better. So yeah, in case it wasn't obvious, in my opinion, the circuit is an S-tier groovebox, especially combined with the next one on the list. You're probably starting to sense a bit of a trend here. Gabe likes portable, grid-based grooveboxes, and that is indeed the case. There's definitely some getting to know the device bias going on here, but as I've gotten to know the MC101, I have become more and more convinced that it's kind of a hidden gem. Like, I'm sure it's reasonably popular, but I actually still think this thing is underrated. It sounds really nice, for one thing. I could get rid of all of my hardware synths that can do 80s type stuff and just get all of my 80s sounds out of this. And I know that maybe sounds like a backhanded compliment, but it can do more than 80s stuff. It just does 80s stuff like genuinely really well, at least to my Gen Z ears. I've used this thing to make the songs that are my most streamed songs on Spotify. And yes, you can use it by itself and do some kind of live performance like with the circuit, but I prefer to use it two different ways than what it's explicitly seemingly made for. The first is to make fully produced music where I'll write and compose and synthesize everything on here, but I'll record way more tracks than I need. Each clip can have a different patch on it. That means that if I'm elsewhere, away from my studio, I can just start stacking as many elements as possible that would go well together, and then eventually use the USB multi-track recording to record all those individual tracks and then structure them in my DAW. And so doing that has allowed me to make some cool synthwave and spacewave stuff that people actually seem to like listening to, and they probably never would have guessed that it was made on this tiny thing. The other way I like to use this is in conjunction with the circuit tracks, as I kind of alluded to earlier, where I'll use this as a sound module and then control it with the circuit tracks. Once again, because I like the way this sounds, and its synthesis engines definitely sound better than those on the circuit tracks. I'll readily admit that. With the update that allowed you full access to the synth engine to design sounds from scratch, the MC101 is pretty much unstoppable in terms of value for money and power for size. I used to hate the workflow of it, by the way. I unlisted my original first impressions video of it because I just no longer agree with it at all. Its workflow grew on me a lot. I did do a dedicated video on how to use it as easily as possible, which still requires a bit of patience, but I really like the MC101. That thing is sticking around. It's kind of becoming part of my sound at this point. But let's move on from portable devices to possibly a bit of a surprising pick. If I'm trying to choose as few devices as possible to hold on to, would I pick that over the MPC-1? And I had to think about this, and I think the answer is yes. And let me try to describe why. I like, out of a hardware experience, something that's hands-on, that's tactile, yes, but also something that allows some form of live jamming, and some form of live jamming that you can then turn into a song that doesn't sound like it was made DAW-lessly. Because DAW-less music production sounds a bit too rough around the edges, usually, for me, for my own goals. I want to be able to work with individual tracks in post. And I'm making videos. I like making videos and would like to continue doing so. So the ability to kind of perform a track live on camera adds a built-in visual component, a built-in music video. So I want to be able to do both of those things, but then I often feel limited by my beloved circuit tracks, even in conjunction with other devices. So the Force is kind of the answer to all of that. It's got a full computer brain inside of it. It's reasonably hands-on. The interface definitely has some jank and confusing parts, but overall, I can navigate it pretty smoothly. And it allows you to do that live performance to finished mixed in post song pipeline that I was after. It basically ticks all the boxes for what I, in particular, was looking for. Now, it's not perfect. Like I said, it's got some interface jank and cruft. I mean, I hope Akai will continue to support it. It seems like they will, at least for the foreseeable future, but that could end at any time. And it has some bugs that would make me really hesitate to take it out for a live performance. I still need to test making a full live set on that, but I think it's going to be a bit of a pain, and so I've been kind of hesitant to spend all this time on it. I also do want to mention that, okay, as a YouTuber, I do want to make stuff that people want to watch, and people usually want to see the MPC-1 more than the Akai Force. So I'm going to operate under the assumption that I do want to make videos, but we're ignoring being a YouTuber, playing the YouTube game here. I would pick the Akai Force over the MPC-1 in those circumstances. I'm lucky enough to not have to choose. I get to keep both, and there's a lot of duplicated functionality, and that is totally excessive, and no one needs to. And I am lucky to be able to keep both, but I would keep the Akai Force over the MPC. It's got the same synth engines, the same sampling capabilities, and the same ability to basically vacuum up other synths into itself with its auto-sampling multi-sample feature. So in spite of Akai at times making me sad or just very annoyed, I quite like the Akai Force. It's not for everyone. Not everyone has the same goals that I do, in which case it's probably simultaneously over and underkill, but for me, it ticks all the boxes. And that's the list. If I had to sell everything and tried to keep my list as short as possible, those are the only three things that would be on it. There's a lot of stuff that I really like that doesn't quite make that list, and once again, luckily enough, I don't have to choose to be that minimalist unless I really want to. Once again, I like having multiple different kinds of gear to make videos about and to get different sounds out of. But some honorable mentions, I would definitely hold on to some form of MIDI controller. A lot of them are pretty similar. I'm kind of agnostic as to which. I probably would hold on to my Rolly Lightpad Block, partially because it's a very small MIDI controller, even if it feels a bit weird and gelatinous to play. But I would also hold on to it because you can't buy them new anymore. It doesn't seem like they're making them, and I don't think they're gonna bring them back from what I've seen. And that's kind of a shame. It was a bit of a gimmick, but for its size alone, I think it was kind of a neat product. My light died. And the other thing I would probably consider keeping if I had to get rid of a bunch of stuff is one hardware synth. The funny thing is, I'm like in SynthTube, even though I'm a Groovebox guy and I make music that sometimes SynthTube doesn't love, you know, like dubstep and whatnot. That's all happening in the DAW, by the way. Bass music and whatnot will always happen in the DAW. Just a DAW-less setup can't really compete with that. It can be fun to try to make bass music with a DAW-less setup, but I don't recommend it for like legit attempts to make something that would be played as part of a dubstep DJ's set. But I would hold on to at least one hardware synth just to have something to do some hands-on sound design with. The MC101 kind of covers that at this point, but I might hold on to something like the Micro Freak for just making weird noises that I could then multi-sample into the Akai Force, or maybe the Korg Mini Log, because I bought that from a friend after begging him for a long time to sell it to me because he wasn't using it. And that's the list. If I wanted to go ultra minimalist, that's the stuff I'd keep that would give me more than enough to have a lot of fun with. If you'd like to see some of this gear in action, including some of the videos that I've mentioned over the course of this video, just use the word video a lot, you can check out this playlist up over here, and of course, hit the description for shirts like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit.